as promised, I wanted to introduce our acupuncturist here at Springs Chiropractic, James.
Nice to meet you. Yes, nice to see all of you.
So, Jim.
Yes.
How long have you been at Springs Chiropractic?
I've been at Springs Chiropractic for about 3 years now. I've been practicing for close to 20 some odd years, I think. I've been doing bodywork for 20 years. I've been doing acupuncture for about 16 years now.
16 years.
Yes.
So, I've only really become well acquainted with acupuncture over the last 3 years that you've been here. I've of course, being in practice 27 years, I've encountered a lot of patients who have had acupuncture experience, and I've heard various stories and things, but I've really become more and more interested and intrigued by especially the outcomes that we seem to be able to get with combining chiropractic treatment, traditional rehabilitative things, deep tissue massage therapy, and then of course the acupuncture. Now, one of the things that I probably wasn't as clear on, I feel like I'm starting to understand it more, but can you explain to me in your terms the difference between traditional Chinese acupuncture and Western dry needling?
Okay. We look at traditional Chinese medicine. This is, really one of the oldest medical systems in the world. One of the things I love to tell my patients all the time is that more patients are treated with traditional Chinese medicine than with all the Western modalities combined. It's also one of the oldest systems we have. We feel like maybe perhaps acupuncture started out as maybe a massage type modality or something like that, but probably transgressed into doing more things like scraping and then eventually into needling. So when we're thinking about Chinese medicine, or when we look at acupuncture from a Chinese medical perspective, we're really looking at a variety of different concepts. When people talk about Chinese medicine, one of the first things they mention are these things called acupoints and these things called channels that run through the body. And a lot of times these channels...
Also meridians?
Also called meridians, yeah. Acupuncture meridians, or we call them channels. I like to use the word channel because to me a channel has like a V in the center and then kind of spreads out. When you think of a meridian, it's only a singular line. Okay. Now, people think that the meridians or the channels are a real thing, and they're not. What they are is they're a metaphor. They're a metaphor for understanding the way the body is built. These meridians run down through muscle chains, and what we find out is that there's never a single muscle that works by itself. Muscles always work together. They work in chains. If I'm going to bring a cup to my mouth, I need to work both my forearm muscles, my bicep muscles, my shoulder muscles, even my neck muscles are going to be activated in that. The Chinese figured this out years ago, or thousands of years ago, that these muscles all combine together and function as a unit. You never just use one or the other. So when we look at the channels, we see a muscle chain of flexion in this case, where the muscles come all the way up and these work together. So when I'm looking at a body through a traditional Chinese medicine, filter, I'm looking at those channels and I'm looking at how those muscles line up. And then I'm using little acupoints along those points. Now, what those acupoints are key spots along the channel or along the muscle chain that either have a special influence on the nerves, a special influence on the vascular system, blood vessels and things like that, lymphatic vessels, which are the lymph or the immune system that happens in our body, and also on the nervous system. There are nerve bundles that are in there. So in Chinese perspective, we say all acupoints. From a Western modern kind of perspective, looking on that, we say this point is more of a neural point. This point is more of a muscular point. This point is more of a lymphatic circulatory point. And so nowadays we're starting to understand that physiology a little bit more. Back in those days, they just knew this point impacted this body and relaxed these muscles and encouraged this circulation and triggered these nerves to influence healing in this part of the body.
So a lot of trial and error.
A lot of trial and error.
3,000, 4,000 years of trial and error.
Right.
How many Chinamen had to die to get some of this stuff figured out?
Well, there is a story. They say that perhaps some of the ways they figured out how acupuncture points worked was maybe during battle, where guys would be maybe take a wound to their arm, and then they have a headache that's cured after that. And so there's some anecdotal stories that perhaps some of the acupuncture was figured out in battle. So
accidentally.
Yeah, accidentally.
Yeah, most medicine, Western medicine, I think, penicillin, for example, that was an accident.
I think most sciences, or good science, ends up being a happy accident.
So trigger point, let's talk a little bit about trigger point therapy. A lot of a lot of doctors, acupuncturists, massage therapists talk about trigger points to their patients. And when you put an acupuncture needle into a trigger point, what's some of the things that might happen? What might the physiological result be, or the patient's experience be?
Okay. A lot of acupuncture is used for treating pain. That's one of the main things that we do here in this clinic. It's a specialty that I have. Whenever we get an area of pain, the body wants to tighten the muscles around that pain. It's a great strategy. Hold that body part in place, and maybe the body can fix that up. But when that tension, like in a trigger point, stay there for a long time, those muscles get locked down, and now we have a state of harmful ischemia. There's not a lot of blood flow getting into that area, and there's not a lot of waste products and whatnot getting out of that area. Those waste products tend to accumulate, irritate those nerve endings, causes a little bit more pain, which causes more contraction, which causes more pain, and we get this vicious cycle going on. Now, I'm going to come in there and interrupt that with an acupuncture needle. When I stick an acupuncture needle down inside of that muscle or inside of that trigger point, one of the first things that happens is the mast cells listed around that release a substance called histamine. Histamin's a capillary dilator, opens up the capillaries, we start getting blood flow into that area, and we start getting waste products out.
Histamine, like antihistamines. When you have an allergic reaction, that's part of the immune system. The histamine response, that cellular immune response, the histamine hormone is a key piece of information there. So I'm glad that you pointed that out. I always think of fibroblastic response, cytokines, and the stem cells and other healer uppers, but certainly so a person who's on a lot of antihistamines might be inhibiting some of their immune spot.
They might be.
Immune response. So something to consider.
Well, and that's it. And you hit on it right there. We are really creating a localized immune response there. When that histamine's fired up, we get that circulation going. The other thing that happens is the presence of that histamine also stimulates these other cells called fibroblasts and macrophages. And those are cells that actually go in there and heal that tissue. They're sort of called in. I say it's like a bat signal. And those fibroblasts are going to migrate into that area. And if there's damage to those tissues, those fibroblasts are actually going to heal that tissue. And so in addition to healing the tiny little hole that I made with the acupuncture, they actually heal the surrounding area as well. So a lot of the healing for acupuncture doesn't happen here in the clinic. It happens when the client goes home and their body is kind of working on that spot. So I'm really kind of tricking the body into, whereas before it's performing this kind of chronic response to tighten down and hold that body still, what I'm doing is I'm creating a little tiny acute injury, and when the body recognizes that acute injury, it fixes that, and by process ends up fixing that chronic injury around it as well. The second thing...
By acute injury, it means small, tiny little needle. In fact, we'll show that. In fact, I think maybe that's what we should do now. We should take time out and actually show an acupuncture needle going into a trigger point. And so maybe we can show how easily that can happen and how little pain might be involved in that. Now, if there is some screaming, hold.
Excellent.